So we did a couple of things. We talked about the project that I'm responsible for in Waterloo Region, which is a crime prevention council that is sponsored and funded by the local municipality, 3 cities and 4 rural areas, and is run by a community body made out of many sectors across the community that have a stake in crime prevention. And it's one of the oldest and longest standing crime prevention councils in Canada. And it was in part responsible for the development of a national network that is now in existence and includes 38, I believe, municipalities. So, and then Felix talked about that part.
Yeah, so I talked a lot about the development, the history of the Canadian Municipal Network on Crime Prevention, which really has been around for a good 16 years, but only in the last 3 years got funding from the Canadian government and was able to start really strongly work, and the idea of bringing the municipalities, the cities together across Canada and figuring out a way of supporting each other through community of practice, and at the same time bringing evidence-based practice closer to the ground, to all these municipal organizations that are doing crime prevention, or these municipalities that do crime prevention. We also talked a bit about the history, so and particularly the link between Europe, including France and Germany, and how historically there has been this connection that's really important in the development of the Canadian concept. And then we talked a bit about, not much, but a bit about some of the challenges that we're facing. And interestingly enough, I think it's clear that we're facing very similar challenges compared to what's actually happening in the European, but also very strongly in the German context.
I think what's interesting and maybe different about the Canadian context is that it kind of grew from the grassroots up. So it came from communities saying we have things to learn from each other. It doesn't matter whether they were big, small, east, west, north, south. Some of the social dynamics are the same. How do we continue to stay connected in a way where we can learn from each other and where we can also challenge both the local, provincial as well as federal level to take upstream prevention seriously. So one of the things that we talked about is how in Canada we're trying to move away from a focus on risk populations and risk geographies to a focus on overall social well-being. So when we want to eradicate crime, it's no different to wanting to eradicate other social issues. The root causes underlying it are pretty much the same. And that seems to be a similar dialogue here in Europe and in Germany. Really across the world. I've been in this job for 23 years. I've not ever heard any one community saying, no, we don't need to attend to the root conditions. The question now is for us, I think collectively across the world, and this Congress is a great opportunity to do that, how do we push that agenda further upstream so that it gets more attention and also funding?
I think another part of where we are similar is the discussions and the recognition of importance of defining crime prevention and recognizing that different people have a different idea what it means. So from a policing perspective, crime prevention looks quite different from the perspective of an educator. And so the necessity of having these conversations within larger contexts, just like this one, and then creating smaller groups to talk about it, to recognize that while we may say the same words, we don't actually mean the same things, particularly in the context of crime prevention. So the struggle, though, of who is the player in crime prevention and who has the responsibility for crime prevention, I think is very similar in Germany and in Canada, where the community, as well as in some cases the police, think that crime prevention is their responsibility, and through that makes it more difficult really to be collaboratively working on it, and so trying to shift that to the recognition that we need to work more collectively and involve healthcare, involve social services, education services. The Waterloo Region Crime Prevention is a really good example of how they're all being brought together in a really productive way.
I think at the end of the day, it's about the promotion of a caring city and a caring municipality, if we just for a second ignore the fact that what we're here to do is to prevent crime, what we're really here to do is to set everybody in our municipality up to succeed. Some people make it, some people come in conflict with the law. And I think it is really important that we begin to understand that we need to collectively own this. People are not born that way. It's not an individual failing, it's a social failing. And if that is the case, if it is an end product of our social institutions and social policies, the good news about that is we can uncreate it, we can change it. Because we made the policies, we can make new policies. And that's really what I think a congress like this is about. It brings actors from within the community to bear their capacities on crime prevention. And that goes way beyond policing and justice and enforcement measures to early childhood education and so on.
So maybe for a final thing from a practitioner perspective or practical perspective, I think this is a video that's maybe around for 4 years, but this is now 2018, and one of the things I think that's across the board countries and municipalities are struggling with is the issue of data and data sharing. And I've had numerous conversations with people from Germany and also from other European countries here now, specifically related to the issue of data sharing and how the issues across the board are the same, and these are the issues we're all grappling with. So Canadian municipalities are now, and governments, the different orders of government are grappling with this, and that continues. But what's really nice is being able to come here and having these discussions and recognizing we're not the only ones. And for us that's really important, because as Canadians we don't have a Europe where there's so many different countries. We essentially, North America, have 3 countries that we can really engage with, and they're very, very distinct 3 different countries. And it's almost like in coming to Europe brings us closer to similar countries, and recognizing those similarities, that how do we share data in a meaningful way and protect people at the same time, but how do we use that data to advance crime prevention at the local level? And that's one of those pieces that makes it really exciting and engaging to be here, because right now and this year and probably for the next couple of years to follow, that's something we're all going to be grappling with.
But if we talk about data, and if this video is around for some time to come, then I think it's important to also say a couple of other things. One is we know what prevents crime. We don't need to research it any longer. It has been researched to death. We have the evidence. Now it's really a question of finding the courage and the public will to implement it. And the second part, in addition to data, there is, I think, the wisdom of community and community experience and practice that also needs to be brought to bear on this particular issue. So it's not just about what does the science say, what does academia say, what does research say, but what are people experiencing in our neighborhoods, and how do we take that wisdom and bring it into the dialogue of some of the key decision makers in communities. Well, we started with a session on the first day where the question was asked, what is the golden rule of crime prevention? And it was really interesting. I think I would say there were 75% of people in the room were police and enforcement, and yet everybody kind of had some of the same things to say. We need to look to the research, we need to collaborate, we need to start as early as possible in the lives of children, and we need to invest long term rather than just through project funding. So those are some of the things that stuck out for me.
And then, in addition to that, the side conversations at the end of the session, talking about issues of data, some interesting questions around how Canada grapples with the Indigenous communities, but that's a very specific issue for Canada. And then the side conversations that continue to happen, that's where a lot of growth is, I think a lot of growth is possible, and a lot of the input can come that we can bring back to the Canadian context and communicate.
Yeah, I don't know what sessions you went to. I went to a session on bystander effect, which is a phenomenon the world over. Sometimes we witness violence or the risk factors for violence, but we don't know how to intervene with it. So I will take some of the information and the curriculum that they have created back to my community, because we're in the process of creating a bystander effect curriculum, particularly when it comes to violence against the LGBTQ community, the gay community in Canada. I think that's the richness of this kind of Congress, that there is more similarities than dissimilarities, but somebody has always got a creative idea that you haven't had yet. And so I'll be bringing some of that back, and I hope that what we presented kind of also created some further dialogue.